came up with the idea to write right before I go after a very good friend of mine, Kevin Gill, took his life about 5 years ago. And I wanted to use my craft in order to help raise awareness and prevention for suicide. Actually, when I was collecting suicide notes, I thought there's got to be one funny one. And there really wasn't, and I scoured. There's some that are lighter, or the way they're expressed in the wording does make people laugh or giggle, and maybe that may be nervous laughter. But this is a very important moment in everyone's lives when they do this. And when we did it in LA at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, the tendency for the actors was to play the result, because you knew where this was going. And I had to remind them that there's an urgency to these notes. These people that wrote these notes felt they needed to get this out. They weren't being heard, and they had to tell people what they felt inside. And that's, I think, why they're all so powerful. I came up with the idea of using real suicide notes. I wanted to do something like the vagina monologues. I wanted to do something that would be easily performed and wouldn't take a lot of rehearsal, so that theater companies, when they did this piece, they could have a couple hours or a couple days. It could be interpreted any way they wanted. And it just came to me how the structure had to be and how I had to group them and tell a story. So that part I knew how to do as a writer. I knew how I wanted to tell the story. And the first step I always do with any play, whether I'm writing or directing, is I have a reading in my living room. And so I invited a lot of friends over to hear it. Some had connections to suicide. And it was a long afternoon because I wanted to hear all the letters. By that point, I had already taken pieces out. Like, people don't know, but actually Hitler wrote a suicide note. And I did not want anybody like that. I didn't want people that killed people or people that had a real terminal illness if they only had a few months to live. So I did the first reading in my living room, and it took about 2.5 hours. And a lot of my friends said, "You're a writer, you need to put yourself in the piece." And that's when I started writing a lot more in between, and they wanted hope. And that's when I put all that stuff about hope at the end. I've been very fortunate in my career to work on Golden Girls and Roseanne and Gilmore Girls. At the time, they're jobs to survive. You kind of got an inkling with Golden Girls this was really something special, just because of the level of actors. I love theater. I miss doing theater. I started in New York as a theater actor at NYU, and I've always wanted to get back to it. And I felt that this piece needed to be with an audience that could hear it and talk about it afterwards, because it's really about starting a discussion. And after the play, I find people just want to be on the street corner sharing with total strangers their own stories or friends or family. So that's why I wanted to do it live. The note that probably hits most close to home is Stephen, the student, at the end. And not to get too emotional, but it does bring that up for me. And I talk, when I do talkbacks after the show, about that I was bullied as 7th and 8th and 9th grade, and it was common for me to be spit on in school. And I would go home and visualize, wanting to take my own life. I don't have depression, and learning more about it, had I had that and those feelings of not wanting to go to school the next day, I don't know if I would be here today. So every time I hear that piece, the hairs on my arm just kind of stand up.